I was starting to think to myself, well, okay, this is the Lord's church. So this place has got some problems. How's your first, month in Brazil? And I was like, I'm going home. The woman that owned the house, she was just super anti-Mormon. I was all like, Mr. Mormonism. And I just have to tell you this. I love you. And then I heard a voice at that moment tell me, ask her to marry you right now. The Lord has swung us back over time more and more to like, I'm healing. Come to me, I will heal you.
Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 27 of the Clarity Podcast. I'm your host, Claire, and this week's guest was Josh Choate. Josh and I were able to discuss everything from defining witchcraft and cults to talking about Mormonism and what Mormonism really is versus what the church, the LDS Corporation, teaches that it is. And we covered so much in his journey, and you guys are not going to want to miss this episode. Tune in for all this and more on this week's episode of the Clarity Podcast. Everyone has a journey they are walking, and along that road, we are met with potholes, road bumps, rain, storms, and sometimes just fog. But through it all, we're really just looking for one thing: clarity. Clarity so we can walk with confidence in that next step. There's one source I run to for that clarity. In the darkest of nights, Jesus offers me light that shines through even the thickest storms. Welcome to the Clarity Podcast, where we find clarity through the one who saves us all. Welcome to episode 27 of the Clarity Podcast. I'm your host, Claire, and this week's guest is Josh Choate. Welcome to the podcast, Josh.
Hello.
We're so glad that you're here, and we're excited to hear your story. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're from, how old you are, and a little bit about you.
Okay, so my name is Josh Choate. I grew up in the Cache Valley area, Logan particularly. I am 45. Yep, that's in a nutshell.
All right. Okay. Tell us a little bit about your family and what you do for a living.
Okay. My family grew up, we were LDS and very, very Orthodox, go every week, very participatory and all the things. We grew up in a cul-de-sac named Celestial Circle. The nickname of it anyway, it wasn't the actual name, but that's what it was referred to in the ward because we had I think 5 or 6 of the bishops in the ward all lived on that street. And I had a lot of friends. So that was kind of the setting for me.
All right.
As I got started.
All right. So tell us a little bit about the part that the church played in your life when you were a child and then later when you were a teenager, and what your religious patterns in your family looked like.
So yeah, we were, like I say, we were fairly Orthodox, or at least I think that's what we all thought. I mean, we'll get into maybe how that wasn't the case later. But as far as we understood, it was the true church, and we were very committed to. We were very committed to Jesus Christ and His gospel and His word that we found in the scriptures. We viewed ourselves as Christian, as well as Mormon, as well as LDS. I couldn't say it was every night of my life, but there were eras where we were pretty good about getting together as a family and just reading the scriptures. Most of the time, I'd come to just be interested in what the scriptures were saying, and I did want to know. And my dad, so in the evening, he would just say, it's time for scriptures. We'd all go into the living room, and I would get a pillow and lay down on the floor and just prepare to listen. And, my dad would just read a chapter and just make comments or what thoughts occurred to him. And he, mostly we read the Book of Mormon, but of course there were we did some of the Bible and other, Doctrine and Covenants, but it was primarily the Book of Mormon. And he really laid out, I grew up with having a great, at least basic map of the Book of Mormon and what was in it in my mind. So that's really, I guess, I would say that's my religion. That's our religion in our family. And we'd go to church and mostly find that mirrored. Um, and so everything was fine.
All right. Okay. So let's transition into your teenage years a little bit and tell us kind of what you were like as a teenager and what part the church played, what church callings you held. I mean, this is a very pivotal point in most young people's lives
Yeah.
because you're trying to figure out what's what. So, what was the church like when you were a teenager?
As far as my personal feelings and belief, I remained very active in the church. My identity was very wrapped up in it. As I kind of look back at that time of my life, probably I was not particularly living that way. Not that I was doing anything way off, but I was in public school. I had my friends, and most of my thoughts and my things I was doing were wrapped around my friends and the stuff we wanted to go do. We were into rock climbing. We were into British rock bands. We were very particular about the music we listened to. As I got into my teenage years, that just kind of consumed me. Although I never, it's kind of it's two-sided. I can give myself a score and say church wasn't a big thing at that time, but I went every week. I did whatever I was asked to do. I went on the campouts. I did scouts. I had just kind of the typical callings of that age, like teachers quorum, second counselor, or maybe I think it was first counselor. I definitely had a fierce belief in Jesus Christ and a moral compass that was right or wrong. And so while I wouldn't say I was very religious, I did have this internal, like, I don't do things that are wrong, even if I'm not doing things that are great or right or super righteous. But I had a strong identity as wanting to follow Christ, that there was right and wrong, that I needed to draw lines in my life. And as far as my group of friends in high school, and I don't know if they would all resonate with what I'm going to say, but as far as I saw, we were like the only group in my class that didn't have some sort of cardinal sin involved in what we were doing. Like there was no, and we weren't messing around or promiscuous. We weren't smoking. There were no drugs. We were pretty straight edge, but we weren't straight edgers. Which again, I don't know if that's still a term, but that was one of the things you could be when I was in high school. So because I kind of stayed in this I was just in a little box that I'd made for myself. I was keeping it Christian.
Hashtag keeping it Christian, guys.
Yeah. So.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I definitely relate to your teenage years, and I was a lot like that too in my own little bubble, no matter what my friends were doing. But I had a group of friends, so I definitely relate to that. So let's transition a little bit into you're getting older. You graduate high school. Did you serve a mission?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us where you served on your mission and a little bit about your mission.
Yeah. So I served in Porto Alegre do Sul in Brazil. And that mission split a few months after I got there. And so I was actually, for most of my mission, I was in what's called the Santa Maria mission, which was is on the border of Uruguay and Argentina, and there was no beach in my mission. Yeah, the very southern part of Brazil. In Portuguese, we'd say Bem do Sul, which is like right in the very south. And it was considered frontier land, or we call it the fronteira, which is frontier in English. It was ranching land. It was subtropical, but it was ranching, a lot of meat, and not the typical jungles and fruit that people think of, and beaches when they think of Brazil. It was almost temperate, but not quite. Then it was more meat, rice and beans in terms of the cuisine. A lot of little towns, not major, huge, big towns, which is also very typical in Brazil. So it's a little bit of a unique mission as far as Brazil goes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about why you decided to serve a mission, and then maybe some of the good parts of your mission and some of the bad parts of your mission.
So if I back up just a second, I remember I graduated from high school, and something we'll probably get into in a minute is I really, while I had a strong identity and belief in Christ, I did not know what to do with it in terms of how to live my life. Like, what should I do? Like, should I be a doctor? Should I be a plumber? I could not figure out what to do. Like, I wasn't opposed to any one thing, but when I would think about, oh, I'll be a doctor because, like help people make money. I think most doctors, that's their story. Well, I thought I could help people and you make good money. So, but since I have a thought like that, it's like, no, that's not it. And there was no answer for me. So but I knew I definitely wanted to go on a mission because I felt it's a deep desire to serve the Lord. And that was my identity. I didn't need to be anything in terms of society or the world. Everything to me was like, what am I supposed to be in terms of Christ? What does he want me to be? And as I looked around the landscape of my life and my community, I didn't see anything that was like, this is your path. You're going to go do this and be that. So so the mission, as I got closer to it, it was like, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to serve a mission. And I just graduated, maybe it'd been a month or so. I remember exactly where I was. I was hanging out at my friend's house. And for some reason, I had left his house and I was just kind of walking down the road, having a little walk by myself. And the Spirit just kind of swooped in and just filled me with this understanding it's time to go. I was my birthday was October 6th. You had to be 19 at the time. And I was in the MTC on Halloween, so it was just like 3 weeks after my birthday. When I got into the MTC, like I say, I had great hopes and desires, but it floored me in terms of, it was hard. And there were a lot of things that didn't fit for me. Just feelings. Like, I mean, I had a lot of ideas about a lot of things, and I was very keen on right and wrong. And kind of as I looked around the MTC and a lot of the people around me, and even things like the cafeteria program, I was starting to think to myself, well, okay, this is the Lord's church. So this place has got some problems if it's the Lord's church, because I was surprised at how many of the elders were, I guess, not that serious. They didn't seem to, they all had their reasons for being there, but it was kind of like, to me, it seemed like most of them were approaching it like a massive party. On the flip side, I didn't enjoy the MTC very much. I had to get through it. I had to do my language training, but I kind of went under this compression where I had to deny something about myself to get through it. It kind of made me crazy. Like I wasn't who I was because I had to be something I wasn't to be able to do it, if that makes any sense.
Can you like pinpoint what was it that you had to be that you weren't? Can you like pinpoint that feeling for us?
I guess I didn't know what it should be, but there was something very oppressive about the spirit of the place. Okay. And so I didn't find myself like on cloud 9 and just taking it. It wasn't that. It was more like, maybe like going to boot camp and you're just like, oh my heck, this is hard. Mm-hmm. I was trying to make sensible choices, but at the same time, I was suffering I didn't have an outlet. So food was one of those moments where you're like, I need to indulge in the food to try to balance the burden that I feel all the other time. I remember just sitting in class and I would just think about lunch or dinner or the next meal, like how many, 2 hours to go. Okay. And so that was, and so, yeah, it wasn't easy for me to find balance. Now, a lot of the elders were totally fine, like it worked for them. And I couldn't figure out why it didn't work for me, but it was the beginning of an awareness in me, like something is not all right here, or I'm not the person I thought I was. And that was a big part of my thinking on the mission. I was so wanting to be there and do that, but the actual being there and doing that was different than what I had imagined. And I deeply struggled, like spiritually, to find the motivation and the meaning in it. And it's not to say it wasn't there, but it was a very personal, deep struggle from the MTC forward. I do remember one night in the MTC, there was food, and then at night there was prayer, and I would wait for everybody to kind of go to sleep, and then I would get out of bed and I would pray as long as I could stay awake, because that was kind of like a lifeline for me to something familiar. And I was just desperate for the Lord to give me something to strengthen me and help me through it. It was really cool because one night I had a vision. That was a big deal to me because while I was suffering and struggling, I was like, okay, the Lord is here. I've got some kind of connection, and so I can do this.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're in the MTC, you're having some dissonance here. You have a vision. God is guiding you. Now let's transition into you're in Brazil. What next?
So we get to Brazil, and it's really hard immediately because, again, I don't have the ability to shape things around me to support myself. That night, the dinner was pretty cool. Meet the president, he's a pretty cool guy. And then we go sleep in the bunkhouse, and it was filthy. It was so bad. The sheets had not been washed in a long time. And okay, like only my wife would probably laugh about this, but sheets are important to me. I'm not like OCD about everything, but I really enjoy clean sheets. Anyway, I get there and there's like bugs smashed into the sheets.
Sick.
Because it's a very tropical, moist place. There's lizards running all over the walls, or mostly on the outside, but a lot of mosquitoes, a lot of spiders. And so I get into the bed and I laid down, I'm looking up, and there's like stuff all over the bottom of the bed, like gross stuff. And I'm looking at the sheets and the pillows, and I'm like, these haven't been washed in a long time. And this started to reinforce what I had already observed in the MTC generally, that all the other guys didn't care about this stuff that much. It just didn't matter, or it wasn't on their radar, or they weren't aware that things could be cleaner. Or they just didn't care, right? But I was like, I just found that to be really hard. So I laid there the whole night. I didn't sleep very much. I kind of kept myself contained, and I just wondered the whole night, because again, I'm like, well, if this is the Lord's church and these are his chosen missionary force, and I just imagine them a little more sophisticated, a little more laundered, a little more organized. Okay. So, and they weren't. And I guess I couldn't say that was true of everybody, but it seemed to be the prevailing attitude. And so I'm like, okay, this is really hard. This is really weird. This is really unclean. And so I got out there. I met my trainer, who was Brazilian, and we went to our house. And it was more of the same. Like, it was really dirty. Between the bedroom and the kitchen, there was a doorway, and up above that, like, for some reason, our bedroom had a ceiling, but the rest of the house didn't. But right above there was like this really incredibly large spider web. And there was this really big spider that at times would sort of venture out. I'm serious, it was like really big. And I'm not a person who calls modestly, or like, like my wife will see a spider, she'll be like, it's a big spider. I'm like, that's not big. That is not a big spider. Yeah. Anyway, it was quite a large spider. And I was terrified of this spider because I'm like, what, does it wander around at night? So I pulled my bed out from the wall so there was like a moat of air around me at night. And, like I say, like, we survived this and it was okay. But again, I had some sort of personal, like, what is it with, I don't know, this kind of stuff? And I guess if these are the circumstances in Brazil, we have to live with it. But in the MTC and at the mission home, we could do, anyway, this is part of my missionary life. Okay. And, so I'll just put that aside. Now, I start doing the work and going out every day. And, everything's just super hard, super, super hard for me.
Besides the spiders.
Well,
right?
Just everything about, so we, we went to the store and, to buy food you go once a week on P-Day, you got to get whatever you need. This is your only chance to get food that you'll have at home. I mean, we'd usually have a meal once a day with some family or other, but, I remember that first time going into the grocery store, I just walked around. I was like, I have no idea what to buy. I can't figure out a single thing to take home with me. So I went home the first week with nothing. And that was a problem because then I didn't have anything to eat apart from one meal a day with members and stuff. So we finally get to the second week and we go back and I still don't know what to buy. But I'm like, I have to buy something. And I found on one of the aisles, I found a bag of cookies that I was like, I know what this is. These are cookies. They weren't called cookies, but that's what they were. Right. It was flour and sugar. So I bought 1 or 2 bags of that. And then I metered out how many cookies I could have for the week each day to get me through the day apart from the one meal that we would have. And so
you were surviving on one meal and cookies?
Yes. Now this would be a pattern that would develop over time.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, I gradually learned some things, but diet was a real challenge. And without the members feeding us, I would have been a real wreck in terms of feeding myself and getting nutrition in Brazil. So that was difficult. But just, again, spiritually, we were knocking on doors, doing discussions, and this is the era of the 6 discussions, of course. And the one thing that I definitely could really do was I had lots of thoughts. I knew the scriptures really well. So I loved to have these conversations, but I couldn't speak Portuguese that well. And I was the junior comp. So I just followed the senior around. We'd go in. I couldn't really participate a whole lot in the conversations. After, I think it was 3 weeks of this, I hit a wall and I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm not cut out to be a missionary. It's too hard for me. So I started making plans to tell the mission president I was going to go home. We're going to have like a conference or like I don't know what, I can't remember stuff now, like a district conference or something like that. He would be coming through in a week. And he couldn't get there fast enough every day. Had just become this Herculean effort to hold myself together. And so that day came, I went in and, he was all, hey, how's it going? How's your first, month in Brazil? And And I was like, I'm going home. And it really surprised him and floored him. And he started to be like, well, hold on a minute. Let's talk about it. I'm like, no, there's nothing to talk about. I've thought about everything. I'm going home. And, he could not, there's nothing he could say to dissuade me, because I had really mentally built myself up for this. And I needed to get out of this pain that I was in. So so it went on for probably like 30 minutes, and I just fended off everything he tried to bring up. And he'd like open scriptures. Well, what about this scripture? I'm like, and I had an answer for everything, And then he finally, he looked at me really perplexed, and he closed his scriptures, and he looked at me like kind of for the first time. He like looked at me, and he knew that he couldn't. He knew that it was up to me, and that he couldn't really talk me into it, and or at least not from the approach that he had at that moment. And so I was like, ha, I have won. And he just goes, Elder Choate, don't do it. Think about your family and your future. Just like, don't go home. And I don't know what happened, but it was like a heartfelt appeal rather than an argument. Mm-hmm. And I think it was the Spirit just came into me, and I just thought, wow, I need to stay. But I'm pretty sure staying means dying. Oh, man. And I was so, like I say, my belief and identity was in Christ, and doing whatever that was. And so at that moment, I had this spiritual experience like, you need to stay. And even if it kills you, you need to stay. So that's what I said, all right, I'll stay, even if it kills me. And that phrasing defines the rest of my mission. It was an absolute Calvary, if you will, like literal every day carrying that cross. It was like, I know that Christ wants me to be here. I don't know anything else. I'm not good at the work. So just being there was my offering to God. And that went on for months. I got transferred after that meeting to another area, and I was put with a mission companion who actually lives here in the valley with us.
Oh, cool.
And he's American. He was so great. And the first thing he said to me, we got to this new area. I met him. Mission president leaves, and he just goes, Elder Choate, do you like video games? And I looked at him like, yes, I do like video games. What are you getting to here? And he's like, well, I like them too, but my last companion didn't, and so we could not play them. But there's a certain place we could go on P-Day. And again, this is not like your idea of what missionaries should be doing. But I was like, yeah, I need to play some video games. And that worked for me, and it worked for him, and it saved me. It was like this outlet where you could not be a missionary for a minute. And so it's funny, but I think God was in this, So that's what we did to create some balance. Anyway, a little bit later, 10 months in or so, I just remember we would getting up in this particular area. We'd leave the house, we had to go up a bit, and then our area was we were at the very top of a big hill that the town was built on, and you could look down on the whole area. And every morning I would get up and descend down into my area, but it was really surreal, because I remember at that time having these thoughts about it was a miracle that I was still alive and that I was still getting up every day and doing it.
Right.
And just going in, descending into my area, doing the work. And let's see, it had been a year exactly, almost. I'd been in 5 different areas in the mission, but I was starting to just collapse physically. Like the mental, emotional stress, the lack of nutrition was all starting to add up. And I started to go down physically, to the extent that I was sent to Iowa to get medical help. And then in Iowa, it got much worse. And I was in Iowa for 3 months, and it got to the point that I was pretty much bedridden. It took a lot of effort to get out of bed. Yeah, one morning I was asleep, and I remember I'm sleeping, and all of a sudden, in my sleep, I become aware of something, but I don't know what it is, but it's something. And it seemed like a long time goes by, and finally I realize there's something that I'm aware of. It's some kind of sound or noise that I'm hearing. And as I thought more and more, like, okay, what is this? I was like, oh, it's like an alarm clock, but it is like at the end of a long tunnel. And then a long time goes by, and that sound just gets louder and louder until I was like, oh, it's my alarm clock. It's morning. Like, my alarm clock is going off.
You were really sick then. Wow.
Yeah, it was like this coming out of this coma.
Yeah.
And so I rolled and landed on the floor, and I doggy crawled down the hall, crawled into the shower, and I would turn that on, and then I would just let the water hit me. And I'd have to be in there probably 30 minutes before I would start to be like really aware and awake and be able to stand up. And then I would get dressed, and then that was kind of like my day. Anyway, so yeah, let's see, but that last week, there's one more week after that. Yeah, it was getting so bad. And I'd get to a point where I was dressed, but I couldn't put the name tag on, couldn't wear a tie. That was too emotionally difficult. But I could dress myself and sit down on the couch. And then we'd take a walk at some point, but toward the end there, like, there's no missionary. I couldn't knock on a door or whatever, just wasn't able to do that. And then one day, so it was Sunday, and I was like, let's get over to church, but we're not going to talk to anybody. We're just going to slip in the back. We'll go late, slip in the back, and then we'll leave before it's over, so we don't have to interact with anybody. Because I don't know what to tell them. If anybody talks to me, I can't come over. I can't do a missionary thing. But I wanted to go and participate anyway. And so we were sitting in the very back corner of the chapel. This is in Iowa somewhere. I was sitting there, and it kind of all came together at that moment. I was like, this is so crazy. I haven't died yet, but I am kind of there. Like, I can't do anything. I've lost 100% of my ability to do anything related to being on the mission. And yet I still have to be here. And that was my conviction. Like, I had to stay. And so I was like, this is such an irony. And as soon as that thought came into my mind, I heard a voice say, it's enough. And it was very crystal clear, but it was like 2 words, and it wasn't even, it is enough. It was a contracted, this isn't 2 words. It's enough. And I was like, what's enough? And so, but it consumed my thoughts for the whole next week. I couldn't think about anything except those 2 words. And one morning I woke up. Well, I was asleep, but these words were in my head still. And all of a sudden, I knew exactly what the words meant. And I would sleep way in at this point, and usually I didn't have any energy, but all of a sudden, like I just burst out of bed, like the blanket like flew, and I was standing on top of the bed, staring down at my companion, and and he was like totally startled, and I just started. I don't know if yelling is quite the right word, but I was just like, I know what it means. I know what it means. And he's like, what? What does it mean? I was like, it means it's time for me to go home. And I grabbed the phone and like danced out of the room. I called the mission president and I was like, Mr. President, it's time for me to go home. And he's like, let me call you back. So I hung up the phone and I was just, I hadn't been this happy since I'd gone on the mission. Something in me was just completely energized. Like I knew I'd had an interaction with God. I knew he was presiding over the whole thing. I knew whatever it was I was supposed to do was done. My mission president calls me back a week later. And you have to understand whether it's the Spirit or I had 3 different mission presidents. Going home was never an option for me or for them. The message was always, no, we can make this work. We can work with you. You can make it. And so, and with the third one especially, it was always, yeah, no, we can do this.
Did the mission presidents know that you were really sick?
No.
You just didn't tell them? Like, how did that work?
They should have known. But they didn't. And I should have known, but I didn't. So it's not like I was telling them I'm physically ill. And I just thought, mostly I thought I was a lazy, incapable person.
Really?
There was no one to tell me otherwise.
Wow.
And so I wasn't really, like toward the end, I was starting to get there a little bit, but it's still very wrapped up in my own unworthiness, I guess. And I just wasn't able to, I didn't see that at the time. And so I didn't speak about it in terms of that. But the mission presidents who were much more mature than me should have seen it. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
I would have seen that in a younger missionary, the man that I am today. That would have been pretty evident to me. But, none of them were, I don't know that their awareness was super high in terms of wellness and health either. They saw it as a psychological issue.
Wow.
A motivational issue. That was like motivation. I'm not motivated. I don't, And so, but again, I really do think that the Spirit was a part of this whole thing and it wasn't time. And so they weren't getting that and neither was I. And if I had been getting it, it would have been very logical to be like, well, then I should go. And so that voice on that day, it was like everything I'd been waiting for was like, it's enough. And I could add words on that weren't said, but were definitely part of the feeling. Like I accept your offering. You've accomplished what you need to accomplish. You can go now. So anyway, I called the president. He called back. And he's like, hey, I called it in. We're going to give you a medical release. And that was a pure revelation, however that came to be, because I wanted to finish faithfully. And basically he's saying you could get dishonorable discharge, you could get medical leave, or you could get medical release. But again, we hadn't established that there was a medical problem. I was just a unmotivated missionary.
Interesting.
And so, he called back just like, he's like, yeah, it is time for you to go. They're giving you a medical release, which means you don't have to come back. Like you're done with your mission. And that was in harmony with the revelation I had received. And when I heard those words, it was such a big deal to me because I had been suffering for so long in this black hole of despair. And I know it just must sound funny to a lot of other missionaries who were there because it wasn't that hard for them, but oh my goodness, it was the hardest thing I ever did. And that I would, because now this is only a year and 3 months in, so I had another 10 months to go, but no, I didn't. My mission was over. So I was on a plane, I got home, and that was the end of my mission.
Okay. All right. Wow. You have quite the mission story.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't take way too long.
No, it's good. We got to have context. Okay. That's great. All right. So now let's transition. So tell us what happened to your health when you got home and then kind of what your next steps in life were.
Yeah. So I get home for about a week. I am just ecstatic. Everything is amazing. Everything's back to normal. And literally, on day 8, I realize, no, the life I had before I left is gone. All of my friends are either still out on a mission or they've moved on. That life that I left was just gone. And so I came back to nothing. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. That had always been my big conundrum. And so there was no path. And what I always thought, it's just this emotional problem that I have. It wasn't just an emotional problem. It was a very physical problem at that point. And so I went into a darker hole than I had ever experienced on the mission, because when I was on the mission, there was always this one gleaming hope that I could go home and it would all end. And so then I got home and it didn't end. And where do you go from there, And that developed really rapidly into, well, there's only one other home I might go to, which is suicide. I could kill myself to try to get away from this absolute darkness that I'm in. And so I think it took about 6 months after I got home, I realized I had become suicidal. I was thinking about how to do it, I wanted to, I was like, how could I do it naturally?
Oh my goodness.
Well, I didn't want to, it's funny because it was the one kind of thought that brought any relief. Because thinking about what job should I get? Any of those thoughts, I was so diminished. It was just too hard to face anything. But this idea that I could escape was very compelling. And so I enjoyed thinking about it. And it's funny, I didn't have a death wish and I didn't want to be grotesque or dark. And I had decided the best way to do it was to drive up the canyon and just jump off a cliff. And that would be the most natural approach. I didn't need a rope. It would definitely work. And so, anyway, I was sitting on my front porch and these thoughts were just kind of going through my mind. And I realized, I would entertain them, but I hadn't totally decided I would do it. It was more it was just fun to think about. And, but I realized at this moment, these thoughts have become compulsory in my mind. I can't control them, which means if I don't make a change, I will end up doing this. I better get some help. I better reach out for some help because I'm not actually sure this is the right path. But it's the only one I can see for myself. So I got a psychologist I was connected with a psychologist who was in my ward. And he worked with me for about a year and he helped me out of it. And it was an amazing period of light for me. Mostly I just needed to talk to somebody and let it all out. And I would say he was very talented at what he did, but I think the greater portion or the greater reason for the success of it was just, I think I could have told it to most people and they can react the way most people would, which is to say, well, that thought is not true.
Right.
And you're not seeing that correctly.
Right.
And he's like, look, we need to just find a starting place here. Let's take a whole year. Is there a single day in a whole year that this isn't how you are? And I went to be like, there are no days in a whole year. And as I went to say it, I was like, no, there's probably one day, maybe two per year that I wake up and I'm not bothered by this. And he's like, okay, that's where we start. There are 2 days a year where you're okay. And we're gonna grow that to 3 days, 4 days. He's like, you're gonna recover from this. And I had never heard like that was so powerful to me because nothing in me had conceived of that. And so I was like, whoa. You mean like it could get better? He's like, yeah, it can definitely get better. And that's exactly what happened. Little by little, it led up. And it got to a point where I was like 1 day a month, real consistently, 2 days, 3 days a month. And then it was 1 day a week, 2 days a week. It got up to like 5 days a week, good, 2 days bad. Somewhere around there, I actually lost, I wasn't counting anymore. A couple months later, I was sitting there like, wait, when was the last time I was depressed? I can't remember. It hasn't happened. It's just gone. And since that moment, it's just wild. I can't possibly get depressed, even when I should. Even when circumstances around me are so bad that you should get depressed. It's like gone. I cannot get depressed. Now I can be overwhelmed, I can be burdened. I can't go into depression. And I the scripture, I will make weak things strong. Mm-hmm. I give weakness unto men that they may be humble and come unto me. I'm paraphrasing. And if they come unto me, I will make weak things strong unto them. So that became a very real scripture at that time where I was like, okay, that's happened to me. Mm-hmm. This has been with me for so long. And it was with me as a teenager, like mm-hmm. the preconditions for it. It was the mission that really brought it out. And then post-mission. And now, I'd like to say my life has been so easy since then. It hasn't. It has been really hard. In fact, there have been some areas that I would say were harder than my mission, but no matter how hard it gets, I can't get depressed anymore. It's just not a part of me.
Wow.
So
that's amazing. That is quite the story of redemption and healing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So about how old were you when you finally had this breakthrough?
24.
Okay. All right.
Maybe 25. I think it's 24.
Okay. All right. So still pretty young. Wow. You learned a lot in your young years.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So what happened next? What did you do with your life? When did you meet your wife? What happened next?
Yeah. So life was still a struggle. I was trying to find my way in the world, but had no thought as to what that was supposed to be. I could not figure it out. I had moved from Logan to Salt Lake to find myself, seek my fortune, and it was like a train wreck. Everything was awful and hard. I lived in some places that I regret living in, just like anything I could get. But I rented this room in a house, like girls lived upstairs, boys lived downstairs. Well, it was like me and another guy, and then 2 girls lived upstairs. And it was just like close to work. And I asked my dad, I'm like, do you think this is okay? Like, I'm living in a house with girls, you know? And he's like, I wish he'd told me, like, no, that's stupid. Don't do that. But he was like, well, are you attracted to him? I'm like, no. He's like, well, that is probably okay. So I take this room for a few months. It was really a dark place spiritually. I didn't have anything in common with these people. I was so isolated, but I was like, I gotta get out. I gotta get out on my own. And the woman that owned the house, she was just super anti-Mormon. I was all like, Mr. Mormonism, and she did not like that about me. But I was going to the gym at that time, and that was good. It was helping me physically. And I was wising up really fast. And, like one day I was like, no, this is a stupid idea to live in this house. I need to find something better. So I end up in IT, computers, because my generation was gifted. We could do it. It was good money. It was the easiest money I could. It was the most flexible work I could find that didn't offend my soul. And so I was pursuing that, and I found myself living at a place in East Mill Creek in Salt Lake area, going to a singles ward. I had, and I was an independent contractor doing freelance computer stuff. And that's kind of where I'd finally found I'm okay. I can pay my bills. I'm not socially. I can hold myself. And I actually was in a singles ward. I had this thing against singles wards. I thought they were dumb.
I think everyone has something against a singles ward. We just don't say it out loud.
Well, okay, and this is maybe a little bit of the story that'll come out later, but when I was 14, I had a spiritual experience that just part of it was this deep understanding and desire to get married to my soulmate. So from the age of 14 onward, that was such an important thing to me. I thought, but I, can't do that till I go on a mission, right? And then I get home from my mission. And that first week where I was okay, I was like, okay, where is she? I'm gonna meet her. We're just gonna get married. Let's not wait,
Oh, the innocence of youth.
I know. And there was nobody. And I wasn't in a good place, right? If there had been somebody, it would have been a terrible idea. And so I'm so thankful that nobody showed up who was willing, because that would have been a bad move at that time. I had a lot of learning and growing to do. But so now I'm 25. I'm living in East Mill Creek. I work for myself, and I'm going to a singles ward begrudgingly, but I need to go, and it's better than the home ward because there's like people my age. I would sit in the back and just kind of be like, this is so lame. And I'm better than this place, I'm not somebody who has to go to a singles ward. And one week the Spirit's like, well, actually you are. And it was something like that, because it was like this shift all of a sudden where I'm like, I'm super lame for having these thoughts. Like, everybody here is a real person with a real life, with real struggles, and they're coming because they want to. And I am judging them and looking down on them. But I suddenly realized that I am more pathetic than they are. Because I'm the one who is not okay with it. I'm the one who's kind of... Anyway, it just dawned on me all of a sudden how lame it was to have those thoughts. And I really just changed in that moment from, I don't know, ungrateful and disgruntled to very, very grateful and very humbled. As I just saw everybody for who they really were and where they were at, and that I was able to be okay with where I was at. And that was the moment then I said, okay, I'm not just going to come to church because it's my duty. I'm going to like make the most of it. And so I became Mr. Singles Ward.
Oh man.
And I would go and I would stay after until there was nobody left. Because, just take what you can get. Talk to anybody. Have a conversation. Get to know people. I went to every single event. And that was so contrary to my previous ideas about what was cool. But it was like, no, this is what I've got, and I need to do the best with it. And so I went in about a week. I went from, I don't have any friends, I don't really have a life, to a very rich social experience. And, good friends, instantly there getting, and that's where I met my wife.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting story because it does show that like we can make the best of our singles years. And that's a hard thing to navigate when you're single, especially as you're getting up there in the later years. But when we choose to make the best of it, to be grateful, that's usually when the right person comes along. Not that I would know, but but I will know someday, hopefully. So tell us a little bit about meeting your wife and tell us about your love story.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Mr. Singles Ward, and I was doing my very best to have game, which I had very little, but I was doing my very best. Mm-hmm. And I'd ask some girls out on dates, and honestly, I think I hadn't really kissed anyone in high school. That was never my thing. So again, just giving you a little more
context.
Yeah, like it wasn't natural for me back then. I'm still
not natural. 25 years old.
I'm 25, and I'm like, I'd love to kiss a girl. I kissed 2 girls in high school, but it almost didn't count. Won't get into the details, but
all right.
I wasn't a complete kissing virgin, but mostly I was. But now I'm going out on these dates, and I don't want to just kiss a girl, right? I want to get to know her. Mm-hmm. But I was getting better and better at just being socially adept. And I found that the friend angle was the angle for me. I wasn't good at coming in the front door like, will you go on a date with me? It was much better to be like, let's hang out, let's go do something. And so I would go if I was invited, or I would try to create some, hey, let's do a hike, let's go do a thing, let's go biking. And so I was starting to have some decent platonic relationships with women in that way. But whenever I would kind of like, hey, let's, why don't you and I go get some dinner alone? Like, it wasn't happening, right? And one day, Amy walks into sacrament meeting, our singles ward, and she had just moved in. And she was wearing like super tall boot things that made her even taller than she actually was. She's on the taller side, I think, but that made her quite tall. So, she kind of walked down the aisle, and I was like, oh my goodness, a tall girl. And so that was like my first glimpse of her. And she had moved into a house where I was known as the 4th roommate, because I would hang out at this house a lot, and it was all girls. But I could just kind of show up and hang out, and it wasn't too weird, because I was pretty good at working the friend angle by that point. And I was like, this is what I got. I'm gonna go with my strong suit here. And anyway, so she had moved into that house, and I found that out shortly later. So that's how I got to meet her. And she was a very busy person. And initially, I was interested, but I hadn't decided to go for it. But I just was, I thought, this is an interesting person, and I do want to get to know her more. So there was one day, several months later, I had developed an okay friendship with Amy, enough I could kind of show up and just with her, not just with the others. And I would bring her filtered water from the store because I was trying to help her be more healthy and not drink the tap water. And that was a thing that I would do. And I'd bring her like organic apples to eat. And it wasn't romantic. It was just like,
Hey, if a guy brought me organic apples, that's romantic.
well, we would talk about health stuff.
Yeah.
And she was battling some health things. And I was too, because that was part of that journey of healing, was finding nutrition. So that was a way that I was just a friend with her. And she wouldn't do it for herself. So I'd be like, fine, I will bring you this stuff because it's really important. You got to eat healthier,
So that's how you get a guy. Don't do it for yourself. Wait for the man.
I think that's why I was there that day. I brought water and I was putting it on top of the fridge. I remember turning around and she was in the kitchen. I was looking at her back. She was doing something at the sink or something. And all of a sudden I was like, I really like Amy. I think I'm going to go for it. I think I'm going to go for this. So I asked her out on a date. And I didn't do anything actually. What happened was I had the thought, and I think a month or something goes by, and it gets really, it must have been the spirit, but I was like just trying to do my job. I worked for a software company at the time, and just, again, trying to get through each day. And I knew I liked her, but I wasn't acting on it. That's right. That's what happened. And I had this moment where I was like, I got to do something, but it's not going to work, It's not like she's going to like me because girls that I like don't like me back. So I called her up and I was like, hey, Amy, can we meet at a place? I just need to see you. I got to see you. And so she agrees to meet me, and we went to Rubio's Fresh Mexican Grill. So we went there a couple of days later, and I ordered a burrito, and she's like, she didn't want anything. But I'm like, okay, so I get a burrito. This is a mistake for everybody who's listening. If she doesn't order anything, then don't get anything. Because I get my burrito, and she's sitting at the table staring at me. And I've got this big burrito. So I'm like eating it, and she's just like got her arms folded, and she's looking, she's like, so what is it? And I'm like, shoot, I shouldn't have got the burrito. This is so awkward. So I kind of set it aside. I was like, okay, look, I just had to meet with you, and I just have to tell you. I have to tell you this. I love you. And now that I've said it, we can both go on our merry way. I have to get it off my chest. The spirit wants me to do it. You don't have to like me back or do anything. I guess I'll finish eating my burrito now. That's kind of how it went. And the only thing she said back really was, she's like, oh, okay, good. I thought you were mad at me or something. And I didn't know her like that well at the time. And I'm like, what business would I have being mad at you? I couldn't figure that out. But that was her assumption. I was really bothered about something that involved her. And, she had to come. And that was what she had in her mind. And I was like, no, I'm good with everything. I love you. Yeah. So we went home and life went on.
Wait, she didn't say anything back to that, like at all besides that?
A few words are spoken, but nothing like necessary to the plot. And, but that I just had a spiritual conviction that I needed to say the words. And then I would be able to move on with my life, do my job, and she would move on with hers. And so she called me about a week later, just say, hey, I wanted to follow up with you about the conversation we had a week ago. And I was like, oh, yeah, like that conversation. I actually almost forgot that because I did. I like, once it was off my chest, I could just think about other stuff. So I was like, yeah. And then I thought, oh my gosh, she's like, is she into it? Could it be? Because she's called me back now. So she's like, yeah, I want to invite you over to breakfast at my house like tomorrow or something. So I'm just like, oh, I've never got this far. So I go to breakfast the next day, I think it was the next day, but it might have been a day or two. So it's so funny because again, she makes breakfast. She's got all these, like lots of details. That's her. And she's made scrambled eggs and a shake or like a smoothie and several different things. She kind of lays it all out before me. And it was funny again, because I'm like, oh, this is so amazing. And I'm eating it and she's not eating anything. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, why aren't you going to have any? Like, we're having breakfast together kind of a thing. And she's like, no, I'm not having anything. So, and I was like, okay. And a little bit awkward, but she's like, so yeah, do you like the breakfast? I'm like, yeah, it's great. And she's like, yeah, okay, well, I just wanted, I think I really owe you an answer to, what you told me last week. And so I just want to be crystal clear with you. I don't want to date you. And there's no chance that we're going to date. I don't feel that way about you at all. And, but I do enjoy our friendship and I do want to be friends, but I just need to be crystal clear that that's all it is and that's all it will ever be. Have I made myself clear? I'd be like, do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? The funny thing though, at this point, and I think I was eating while she was telling me that.
She wanted to like lighten the blow, so she fed you.
Yes. And, but she was just unloading this on me. And I was like listening and hearing. Something else was in my mind that was really powerful and strong while this was happening. And it was telling me, don't believe a word she says. There's totally going to be something here. And so I just nodded and smiled while she was talking. And she got done and I was done eating. And she's like, oh, so are we good? And I'm like, yeah, totally great. Oh, this is great. Thank you so much. And I go out to the door and she's like, bye. And I'm like, bye. And I'm walking away. And then I stop and I'm like, hey. And she's like, okay, yeah, what? I was like, you said we could be friends. And she's like, yes, friends. And I was like, well, friends hang out. And she's like, yeah, they do. I was like, could we hang out as friends next Tuesday? And she's like, yes, we could. And that's how we started dating.
Did she know at the time that's how you started dating?
No. Well, no. Okay. So for 3 years, we were not dating. Mm-hmm. We were just friends.
All right.
But we would hang out quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And there was some benefits in the friendship that were more than friends. There was a couple of times. But she would always like come back from that like, no, we're not doing this. So it was that way for 3 years after that.
Wow.
Well, it's funny. I mean, it wasn't happening with anybody else, so I didn't really have anywhere to go. And the friendship became really great. She would call me all the time, in fact. And so it was a really strong relationship. But in her mind, it was platonic, period. Now, for me, at a certain point, I'm like, no, it's not. You're calling me too often, In fact, I stopped calling her to just like, because I don't want this to be one-sided. So I know that I'm into it, but she says she's not. So I'm not going to call her. But then she would always call me. And she became the aggressor, if you know what. And so, and there, we would talk about it a couple of times where I'm like, Amy, where's this going? You know, like, we're going to do this forever? And she's like, and it was always like, well, I'm not going to marry you. And she was dating other people at the time, but no one like seriously. She'd do dates and stuff. So the day came though. I had a cool experience with my one singles ward bishop. Called me into the office one day, and he's like, "So who you into? You got any prospects?" Because I guess that's what you do as a singles ward bishop. You help your people get married. And he's like, "Yeah, are you dating anybody?" And I'm like, "No, not dating anybody." Because that wasn't the dynamic with Amy and I. We were friends, good friends, but. And I'm like, no, I don't really have any prospects. There's just nobody, you know. And he's like, come on, there must be someone in the ward that you like anybody. And I'm like, okay, well, there's this girl. I really like her, but she does not like me. And I tell him all about it. And he knew who Amy was because she was in the ward as well. And it's so funny because he listened intently for probably like 15 minutes. And as everybody knows by now, I'm kind of wordy when I get telling my stories. And I get done and he looks at me, he's like, I don't know about these things. That's what he said. And he says, what you ought to do is cut bait and run. And tell her, but before you do, tell her that you need to obey the commandments of the Lord, which one of them is to get married. And and tell her you want to get married. And then if she doesn't, tell her it's over and cut bait and run. So that's what he told me. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I did talk to Amy, kind of didn't follow it to the letter, but we did have a conversation about possibly getting married. And then I told her, like, I need to like date other people. And we're not going to have the same kind of friendship if I do, So that's how it went. But didn't really do it. Then like a few months later, I got a new bishop and he calls me in and he's like, are you dating anybody in the ward? And I'm like, I'm not. I've got no prospects, no chances, nothing. And he's like, come on, there must be someone. And I said, well, there's this girl. And I told him all about it. And then he says to me, I do not know about these things. But what you ought to do is cut bait and run. But before you do, tell her you need to follow the commandments of the Lord to get married. And if she doesn't want to get married, then you should cut bait and run. It was word for word. Exact words.
What?
The two bishops said it was like they had read a script.
That's interesting.
And I took it as the Spirit reaching out to give me a message from the Lord. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I need to take this really seriously. So I had this really formal meeting with Amy where I told her I need to follow the commandments of the Lord to get married. And if she didn't, I was cutting bait and running from her. And not to ever call me again or come over because, it's too hard to date somebody else when we're hanging out all the time. So I did that. And she cried a little bit. She didn't like what I was saying. But she didn't want to get married to me. So we ended it.
Okay, how did you end up getting married? I'm like dying to know this, Josh.
Well, 6 months later, she called me and she's like, hey, I know that your birthday's coming up and I know that you're like a big baby on your birthday and you don't do anything, which was very true. And I was like, yeah, so? And she's like, so I'm going to bring dinner or like food, and you're going to throw a party, like a birthday party for yourself. And okay, that's not me at all. And I was like, Amy, and this is the first time I've talked to her like since that whole thing, right? And I'm like, no, you're not. I guarantee you're not going to. So we hung up. She calls me a couple of days later, and she's like, okay, I got plans. I'm going to bring food on your birthday. Have you set up the party? Have you invited people? I was like, Amy, no, I told you no. And I meant it. I'm not going to do that. And she's like, I'm coming and you better invite some people. And so, I hung up the phone just like, I'm not inviting anybody. My birthday is an alone day for me to reflect on the many things that haven't happened that I want to happen. Namely, getting married.
Okay, that is what the birthday becomes after so many years, though.
Yeah. It's like, well, I'm another year older and I've got no prospects. This is horrible. I don't want to see anybody.
Yep.
All right, so the day of the birthday comes and she shows, okay, so my roommate at the time, he had heard me talking on the phone with Amy that last time. And he's like, dude, is that Amy on the phone? And I'm like, yep. And he's like, well, I thought you guys were like through. And I was like, yeah, we are. We're through. And he's like, well, then why are you talking to her on the phone? And I'm like, well, she's calling me. And she's like, going to bring dinner on my birthday. And he's like, yeah, but you guys aren't dating. I'm like, well, she's doing it. Okay. And it's like, and it is over. And even if she wanted to marry me now, I would say no, because I have moved on. She had her chance. But she is coming over on my birthday with food. And then I think I was like, hey, I'm supposed to invite people. Will you like be here for that? And he's like, sure. I really did mean like, I really took seriously the cut bait and run thing because I believed it was from the Lord, and well, it was. So anyway, she gets there, she knocks on the door. I open the door and I'm just, this rush of like endorphins or something happens. And I'm just like, yeah, like birds are singing, light. I felt this incredible love for her. And it was very romantic, like, wow, I really, really like this girl, And I really thought I had got over it. But, at that moment, it just all flooded in more powerfully than ever before. And this story, it still gets wilder, but okay. I have that experience. And so we have dinner. And I don't, we're just talking 1,000 miles an hour, me and her. And we just kept going, and we were just so engaged in catching up over the last 6 months. And then I took her into my office where I had a whiteboard, and I started sketching out the entire second coming as I understood it at the time. It took me about 3 hours to lay out all the pieces. And she just sat there and like listened to the whole thing, which was, I kept thinking, this is really crazy. Like, how on earth does she have the stamina to listen to me this long? But we were both kind of enraptured by something, and it was late at this point. I think it was 2 or 3 a.m. We just talked into the night, and so I finally reached this point where I stopped talking. And I remember leaning back against the wall like, this was a great birthday. Like, Amy brought food. We had a great conversation. And it's finally not weird between us. It doesn't have to be marriage, And then I heard a voice at that moment tell me, ask her to marry you right now. And it struck fear into the core of me, because I just thought, oh, that won't go over well. She will not like that if I bring that up. And I started to really wrestle against that. And after a couple of minutes, I just was defeated. Like, I was like, I cannot fight against this power. I'm going to have to do this. But it's going to be really bad when I do. So I looked over at her and she's like, yeah, what are you thinking? And I was like, I think I'm supposed to ask you to marry me now. Am I wrong about that? And she got a pretty angry look. And whatever was fighting me was like on her at that moment. And she was really wrestling against it. And I can't even remember what, like an hour goes by and we don't really say much. And she's just kind of like wrestling with something. And I'm just kind of like chilling out, like something's going on. But I don't know what it is. But she's like, I just have to go. I have to go. And I just remember I had her hand and she started getting up to go. And I was like, wait a minute, something is going on here. And apparently it's on my side. So I kind of just held onto her hand tight enough that she couldn't get away. And I was like, yeah, sure, of course. But I believe I asked you a question. And so just go ahead and answer it, and then you can go home. And she kind of gave me this really infuriating look, and she sat back down and just kind of stared at me for like another hour. And she told me at the time, like later, she told me she was just trying to figure out how to tell me no, but she could not figure out a way to do it. She couldn't get the words out of her mouth. And so we finally, and it's like 5 a.m. and I've given up. I don't know what's going on. And she gets up and I'm like, okay, this time she's going to go for real. And I obviously have no business keeping her any later. And so that, this is the end of this interesting, whatever this is. Anyway, she gets up to go and I'm like, okay. And she has a CTR ring on and she takes it off and she goes, here. And I take it, I'm like, what's this? And she's like, it's my ring size and I don't want gold. And she walked out. So that's how we got engaged.
All right. So now you're engaged. What happened next?
All right. So let's see. We got married.
That's good.
Well, we don't have to take a long time. We got married. We got married in the Logan Temple. We tried to not be traditional about it, but then we kind of were. It's kind of hard to escape the trap.
Yes.
Got pregnant. That happened pretty readily. Mm-hmm. I was still struggling with what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I decided that I would start an IT business that would make lots of money and solve all those problems. But I knew the whole time, this is not my calling. I prayed a lot about it. And, nothing was really that forthcoming from the Lord in terms of, here's exactly what you should do, become a plumber. Well, one big thing was my physical challenges, illness, if you will. And Amy had very severe physical challenges as well. And that was part of how we kind of initially became friends. So we thought a lot about health and wellness and how we would approach that. And at this point, we'd really realized that alternative things were our place. Mm-hmm. We if it was mainstream, we probably weren't doing it. Right. Because we'd both had enough experiences that had shown us we were going to have to look elsewhere. That, we were home birth, home school, home do-it-yourself everything. And because we were looking for truth, looking for solutions to our mutual questions and queries. And so, I mean, we came together, and this quest was still very much in front of us now as a married couple. And there were few, if any, easy answers to those questions. But we were into the alternatives of things, and found there was a lot of truth in those areas. And then in many cases, we did a lot of things that later we thought, no, that probably wasn't true, or we don't recommend it now.
Sure.
Whether we're talking about a diet or a healing modality, or there's so much out there, and we, a lot of people are on that path going through it all. And the Lord's shown us more and more where the truth is. And surprisingly, it gets more and more simple over time.
Yep.
Because he's like, I'm the way. And you're like, yeah, but what does that mean? I'm going to go do this thing over here. And then you're like, oh, that isn't what I thought it was. Not that maybe there was some good in it, but yeah, like in our healing journey, we did everything. We did all the diets. We did all the modalities.
Mm-hmm.
We tried everything. And the Lord has swung us back over time more and more to like, I'm healing. Come to me. I will heal you. Get to know me. And so we've really changed our thinking over the years in how we pursue healing, which at this point, it's just straight up Jesus.
Yep.
It's straight up Jesus. If he tells us to do something, we do it. That's healing. And the faster, the better.
Yep. I get that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit about the role that the church plays. Well, you guys are in a pretty unique place. There's not a lot of mainstream LDS people who, are looking into things like that. So what did kind of your church life look like when you started having kids, and that's the phase of life you're in?
We were very active and faithful. But we were peculiar. And I don't know, I have to look back I think I didn't know that for a long time. I think Amy was more aware of it than I was, because I'm like, no, we are what church people are, and we're following the truth, and this is in the scriptures. And so we're just doing the things that are in the scriptures. And of course, that's what everybody else in the church is striving to do.
Right.
And yes, over the years, I observed that not everybody was actually doing those things or on the same quest, it seemed. And I couldn't figure out why not. Except, well, maybe that, you can always come up with some reasoning why they're not there yet, and give them the benefit of the doubt. And I love my people. I love the LDS communities. It's my home. It sounds a little bit weird, but they're my people. So I felt very connected with the people, with the communities, with activity in the church. But this was encompassed, or this was because I love Christ and I want to serve him. And so, of course, I'm going to go to church. And now, at the same time, and this is a pattern, I did not like going to church. It was a real drag for me, to be totally honest. And I don't know that I could have quite said that a few years ago. It's a lot easier to say now. But Sundays were, I just went through this big thing that I don't get depressed. And technically I don't. But if I do, it was like Sundays were like, oh, we got to do this again. Got to put the tie on, And I have real issues with ties because of my mission and how hard that was.
Right.
It took me a while before I could put a tie on again after the mission. But gradually I kind of start doing it, and I can get through a few meetings. And so I believed, I'm doing this thing. It was very similar to the mission. It was like, I must do this. But for some reason, it's so hard. It's like, what? I imagine it would be joyful and full of the Spirit. And often it's not. It takes a lot out of me to go. But I'm committed to serving the Lord. I just am. And the temple was the same way. I did not like going, but that's what you do. You have to, you just have to put your shoulder to the wheel, and you have to do hard things. And if you're not getting, major spiritual warm fuzzies, it's your fault. You're not going prepared, and so I would just do my best to have a good attitude and try to get something out of it. But all along, it's some part of me is like, but is this really how the Lord's church is supposed to be? So I would always chalk that up to like, well, it's not perfect. The how do they say it? Like, the church is true, but the people aren't perfect.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
We hear that a lot.
So I mean, then or now, I'm not critical of the church in this sense, or the people, because that is true in a sense, but I've stopped blaming my own lack of spirituality as the cause of me not having the sort of response that I think I should have. Because obviously at some point the truth in you has got to come forward and be like, something is wrong. And I'm not going to write it off anymore. And so anyway, that's the role that church played. It was, we moved a lot, and everywhere we went, we got active in the ward, and we knew how to just ingratiate ourselves, make friends, and derive powerful benefits out of the social network that is the LDS world. Okay. And but we're kind of more and more over time weirdos at this. So we were both like, we knew how to play that better over time. Like, yeah, we're super weird, but we're super cool. And,
because we're cool, it's okay that we're weird, right? Right?
Yeah. And so...
All right. So here we have Mr. Mormonism, Mr. Singles Ward,
Yep.
just in the boat, mainstream, but kind of weird. All right, let's transition to your awakening journey. What happened that kind of started the whole thing?
Okay. So it begins in 2017. Okay. We were living in Hiram, Utah. We had 4 acres on the reservoir. Pretty cool. But it was a fixer-upper, and I didn't have a lot of money to fix it up. So it was 2 things at once. But we were getting closer and closer to like getting it to a place where it was cozy. We were living the dream, and we were going to have a little 4-acre pioneer cottage on the lake. And I was out working in the yard, and the Spirit just told me, you don't have the gift of the Holy Ghost. And it's just one of those moments, and I was like, whoa, what does that mean? Of course I have it. Maybe it means like, and here we play this game again. I must not be worthy of it. I don't do enough to bring it into my life, So I have it, but the problem is me. And so that's how I interpreted it for several years. But whichever way you look at it, the effect of it is missing. And that was like, oh, that's why everything. That's why church is hard. I don't love going to the temple. I read about people in the scriptures and what their life was like and what they experienced and how God worked. That's not how he works in my life. It's different. And it's not that I haven't had spiritual experiences. I've had really good ones, but not at that level, not like that. And I've been looking for that for a long time. I believe Nephi and Alma and the rest. I'm raised on those stories. And that's how God works with people. And so now the Spirit's telling me I don't have the gift of the Holy Ghost. It just makes all kinds of sense. And confirmed at least to a point, if I don't have it, a lot of people don't have it.